John Dickerson, Ed O'Keefe, and Nancy Cordes. This is a special 2020 America Decides coverage as the race for the White House may be coming to an end, possibly very soon. This morning, Joe Biden took the lead over President Trump in Pennsylvania and Georgia for the first time. The margins are narrow, but they are growing. In Pennsylvania, Biden leads by about 9,000 votes at this hour. If Biden were to win Pennsylvania, its 20 electoral votes would put him above the 270 that he needs to win the presidency. President Trump would have no path to victory should he lose the state of Pennsylvania. Now, at this moment, we should remind everybody CBS News is not yet projecting a winner there. Now, let's take a look at Georgia, where Biden's lead is much smaller in the state of Georgia. It's just over about 1,500 out of 5 million votes cast. Georgia's Secretary of State saying just this morning he expects there will be a recount in the state of Georgia. Our projections at this hour still give Biden an electoral lead of 253 to 213. Now, the Trump campaign put out a statement earlier this morning saying, quote, "This election is not over," and citing many irregularities in Pennsylvania without providing any evidence of those irregularities. And let's bring in our panel here to discuss exactly what's going on. So many developments overnight, but also not only Georgia and Pennsylvania, but we just saw a new batch come in Nevada, and we're seeing Biden's lead grow there as well.
If you're a candidate right now, you want your lead to be growing. That's happening for Joe Biden in Pennsylvania. It's happening in Nevada, and it's happening in Georgia. For the president, it's only happening in Arizona, where he is shrinking the lead that Joe Biden has, but he is not shrinking it by enough, it looks like, to be able to challenge Joe Biden in that state where Joe Biden is ahead by about 43,000 votes.
Let's just set the stage, because we mentioned at CBS News, we've still not called 5 states.
That's right. That's right.
We have characterized Nevada and Arizona as likely for Joe Biden. Major Garrett is our chief Washington correspondent. He is over at the wall. Can we go inside? Let's start first with the state of Pennsylvania. Let's go inside and just look at how narrow that margin is right now.
Sure. Here we go. 20 electoral votes in Pennsylvania. Let's call that up. 49.4% for the former vice president, 49.3% for the president. But the lead has been growing. You can see it's almost 9,000. It's actually just over 9,000 for the former vice president. That's growing. And you want to compare it to where Hillary Clinton was. Look at the areas that were light blue for Hillary Clinton. Look at where they are for Joe Biden. So areas that were light blue became darker blue. That means a larger Democratic support. And very few places that were red in 2016 changed even redder. They got a little bit less red in certain parts of Pennsylvania. That's really the tale going on there. So that's the story in Pennsylvania. 20 electoral votes, as you said just a moment ago, Nora. For President Trump to win re-election, there is no plausible scenario that does not include Pennsylvania. And the trend lines, and I just talked to the former Republican governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Corbett, about this. He's looked across the state. He's looked at all the counties. He was a very important source of mine on election night in 2016, suggesting that what he was seeing was going to project an ultimate Donald Trump victory. He was right about that. He just told me, I've looked everything across Pennsylvania, and I don't see any path for the president to overtake the lead that Joe Biden currently enjoys in the Keystone State.
Okay, hold on with Pennsylvania, Gail, because you had Republican Senator Pat Toomey on CBS this morning, and you asked him about the question about whether there's any fraud in Pennsylvania, and he said what?
He made it clear that there is no fraud that he can see, that he thought that it was totally baseless. That said, he also said he's okay with a recount. He is predicting and believes that there should be a recount in Pennsylvania because the lead is so close. But he also made it clear, no, there's no fraud in Pennsylvania that he is aware of, that he has seen.
And can we give everybody a sense, because I guess people want to know, if Joe Biden has a 9,000 vote lead in the state of Pennsylvania, what is still outstanding? Maybe Anthony can weigh in. Why haven't we called the state of Pennsylvania? What else do we need to know? What's still outstanding?
That's an Anthony Salvanto question and answer. And he's right there.
I can't answer that.
And he's going to walk over and assist us. What I can tell you is, before Anthony gets here, 95% of the vote in, but Anthony, take it from there. Because once you start getting deeper into that screen, I start getting a little bit nervous and I back away.
That's perfectly fine.
That's what I do.
You know, the rotator cuff injuries have been known to happen. Reach in enough on a late night. So hit that back arrow,
this one?
Major. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Now, well, zoom in on Pennsylvania one more time. Hit Pennsylvania one more time. Okay. Hit that check mark. Okay. So we have a rough estimate of the outstanding vote, which is 133. That's been declining over the course of the day. Now, we're also trying to find out how many provisional ballots there may be. Okay, so the trend lines are very clearly with Joe Biden, but right now we're down to pretty straightforward math. Is what the president would need to catch up, is that just too much, right? Is it just too much of what's outstanding? We also know that a little bit more of what's outstanding is from Philadelphia, which is a Democratic area, a little bit more from Allegheny County, which is Pittsburgh and a Democratic area. But there's another wrinkle here, which is for folks that have been following this all the way through, you'll remember, this is not just about geography, it's about type of ballot. If it's an election day ballot, it may favor the president because a lot of Republicans voted on election day. If it's a mail ballot, it may favor Joe Biden because a lot of Democrats voted by mail. So trying to determine what that is, and then finally, is there enough of a cushion, enough of a margin for Joe Biden that if you project out to when more votes are counted, all the votes are counted, that it would still remain with a Biden lead. And that's sort of the anatomy of a projection.
And that is so well said, Anthony. And just everybody wondering why he has both an earpiece and an AirPod in his ear is because that's what he's doing. He is doing so much work all at once. He is triple tasking.
He's a good multitasker.
It's not a playlist.
And when he's the pilot, I can push the right buttons and the screen will work. So as long as he's the pilot, I can get through this.
All right, good. Well, we'll give you a break for a second and go inside each of these states as we progress through this hour. Nancy Cordes has got some reporting on what essentially members of Congress are saying to the White House at this.
Right. The president is not getting the lifeline from top Republicans that he would like to be seeing, starting with Pat Toomey, who you just discussed, who told Gayle this morning he thought the allegations that the president was making were disturbing and that he didn't see any evidence of what the president was alleging. When the top Republican officials in the state of Pennsylvania, if he's not on your side, that's a bad sign.
That seems to be, though, Nancy, what most people are saying about the president's allegations.
And
very few are coming to his defense on this.
Perfect example, James Lankford of Oklahoma said, I don't have any evidence of fraud. If the president does, he should come out and say it. So another Senate Republican who has sided with the president many a time, not doing it now. Roy Blunt, another senator from Missouri, a Republican. He's the chair of the Senate Rules Committee. He said, I think the president should turn this discussion over to his lawyers.
And what's the word from Mitch McConnell? That's a voice everybody's curious to hear from.
Mitch McConnell put out a tweet this morning that was very notable for what it did not say. This tweet said, we should count all the legal votes. We should not count the illegal votes. Period. What it did not say was that, he believed anything that the president was saying, that he thought that there was fraud, that he thought that the count should be stopped. That's what the president has wanted to hear from Republican leaders, but he didn't get it. I should point out one notable exception to what you're hearing from a lot of these top Republicans is the top Republican in the House, Kevin McCarthy, who said that the president has won. And so everybody who's listening, do not be quiet. We can't let this happen before our very eyes. So he's really splitting with the leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, here. And I think that's more a reflection, not so much of his personal politics, because he's actually more moderate than Mitch McConnell. It's more a reflection of the politics of his conference. And he knows that there are a lot of House Republicans from very red states who are with the president on this, and he needs to show that he is.
Interesting tweet from Donald Trump Jr., who called out potential candidates for 2024, saying, okay, 2024 candidates, time for you all to speak up. I thought that was very interesting, that he was calling them out.
And they did within minutes. Some of them did.
Right. They put out some perfunctory statements, the Tom Cottons, the Ted Cruzes of the world, who have been hopscotching to early voting states already, supporting other candidates because they want to keep their options open for 2024.
All right. Thanks, Charles. Let's bring in CBS News' Nicole Killian. She is covering the Biden campaign. She is there in Wilmington, Delaware. And what are some of the discussions that are ongoing right now in the Biden campaign?
Well, I can tell you there are discussions happening in the campaign, and for the most part out here at the Chase Center, it has been relatively quiet, and even the candidates themselves have been pretty quiet on social media. What we do know is that the Biden campaign continues to track the races. They feel very good about where they are in Pennsylvania and in Georgia. And they are also dismissing some of the president's comments last night from the White House about the integrity of the election. And they say if he refuses to concede, that it is ultimately the American people who decide this election. Now, yesterday, the former vice president urged patience with the vote count and said that he had no doubt that he and running mate Senator Kamala Harris will prevail. He also attended a briefing on the coronavirus and the economy. CBS News has also learned that in the event that Biden wins, there are plans for additional Secret Service protection, although the agency said it would not discuss its methods, and temporary flight restrictions have also been extended around the former vice president's home here in Delaware. Nora?
Nicole Killian there in Wilmington. Thank you. Let's bring in Ed O'Keefe. And Ed, what the campaign doing right now? They're preparing for the possibility that he may have to address the nation.
Yes, they are likely to come later today. That is not only designed to keep the momentum going, but to get ahead of anything the president himself might try to say again today. They've rented that space there in Delaware, just a few minutes from his home. That's from where he would speak. And then, in their view, the transition would begin. There is a Biden transition team already in place by law. It's had to be for several months now, since the summer. And it's believed that hundreds of people would quickly be hired to begin what's called an agency review process, where they send in transition staffers into each of the agencies and literally start lifting up the hood and looking at what's been done, what could be changed, and who will stick around. One other thing I think we should emphasize here, this is, a lot of people watching today across the country, quite anxious, quite nervous about what's going on, might be frustrated and upset by the results. There's one guy who's quite accustomed to close contests. Consider the history. 50 years ago this week, a young Joe Biden won his first political contest, a seat on the Newcastle County Council, and he won it by just 2,381 votes. 2 years later, he won his Senate seat by just 3,100 votes. So he's somebody who knows how to win a close contest. He's been through it before. One of the few.
Has he given any indication what time he would speak today? Have they said?
It depends on if and when news organizations project him to be the winner. And as Anthony showed us, there are still some votes outstanding that lead most news organizations at this point to
But
withhold
what about,
that.
and I know that the president has mounted a number of legal challenges in these states. The former Vice President Joe Biden has a huge legal team that he has had from the beginning, including Bob Bauer.
Right.
I know that you have spoken with him and those close to him. What do they believe about the merit of some of these legal challenges that President Trump has mounted?
The Biden legal team that is in place if needed has not engaged in any single one of these lawsuits filed by the Trump campaign so far.
Why is that?
Because they see no merit and no reason to do so. And as we've seen, most of them have been quickly tossed out by judges because there was no evidence or there was no standing. So until they believe one has merit, they'll get involved. It's likely that they will send, and we know they have people in position to observe recounts, as Georgia now says they're going to hold. If there's a need for one in another state, they would be there for that as well.
Many people are already praising Joe Biden, though, for the way that he has handled this. From the very beginning, he was calling on calm. He was calling on patience. He said, I know there are many people that didn't vote for me, but I am not I'm the president. I would be the president of the United States, and I would be in charge of governing all people,
right,
regardless of how you voted or not.
Yeah,
it's not red states, blue states. It's the United States of America.
And we can
such an important message at this particular time.
Absolutely, and we can expect he would amplify that message later today. Remember, we've seen the exit polling in the last few days that shows that about 50% of the country would be angry or concerned about him becoming president. You have to acknowledge that, and one wonders how the president might stir the pot as well. So Biden's going to continue to try to keep that kind of a message out there.
Except speaking of pot stirring, you have a Biden spokesperson saying the United States government is perfectly capable of escorting trespassers out of the White House when asked if the president refuses to concede, which seems neither gracious in victory nor in keeping with the tone set by the candidate, Joe Biden, who has consistently been talking in a way that is contrary to Donald Trump and letting that contrast show.
John, it does seem a bit inflammatory, which surprises me, Nora. When you reached out to the campaign, they said, oh, yeah, that's true. Yes, we did say that, and we mean that.
And it reiterates something he said himself back in July to Trevor Noah on The Daily Show, that there are people who would remove him if necessary.
And but we are a long way from that.
We are.
Of course,
we are.
President Trump, if there is going to be a change in power, any president stays through the inauguration.
Right. But the Biden camp has made it very clear to Ed and to I and to others that they're not going to wait for a concession from the president, as you typically do, to come out and declare victory. If the media organizations say that he has gotten to 270 with any combination of states, whether it's Arizona and Nevada, whether it's Pennsylvania, he is going to come out and declare victory.
And which reminds me, because it was very late in the night of election night in 2016, did Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump ever end up speaking?
Yes.
that
They
night?
did
Yes.
speak.
Okay.
Yes.
She did call him.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
she
but
called
she
him
didn't
first.
come out that night. She
And
did
that
not.
is
She
the
did not.
precondition.
Her campaign
That's-
manager did.
That's the precondition for the peaceful transfer of power.
Right.
You go through a series of steps, and one is the concession, and that sets the ball in motion so that this can be peaceful. And there's a lot of work to do, as Major mentioned earlier. There's a lot going on in the world. The transition needs to start happening if it's going to, because the to-do list is awfully full.
I don't know if we've had another instance in modern history where someone has come out and declared victory in the race for the White House without waiting for a concession from their opponent first.
And that was what Trump did in 2016?
Yes, he did. She called him, I think the Clinton campaign was in shell shock. This is not what they expected to happen. But still, she called the president and conceded, and that's when
Right.
he came out and declared victory.
Right.
All right, I want to bring in Major Garrett on that point, too.
Yeah, it was a cell phone conversation. Hillary Clinton called. Kellyanne Conway had the phone, handed it to Donald Trump. Donald Trump took the call. There are people within the Trump inner circle that still have that on their phone videos, capturing that moment. After that, the president gathered the family, gathered those who were with him in Trump Tower, went to the Midtown Manhattan Hotel, in the Hilton Hotel there. I was there. The country watched it. He walked out, gave his speech. That's how the process worked on that evening. One quick thing about what's going on. I've been talking to several Republican officials this morning, and they say, look, the Republican Party is also the Trump Party. And if a lot of Republicans already at this point start saying, oh, the president's got to give in, the party beneath them, the one that identifies with this president, will be enraged with them. They have to work the party and the president through this process. And they tell me they are doing that, but it will take a matter of time, and it is step by step. And if they feel, or rather, more importantly, the grassroots of the Republican Party that is strongly for Trump feels these Republicans are getting ahead of the president or forcing him or pushing him, they fear the blowback, and they're trying to work through the process gradually, quietly, much of it behind the scenes.
Building an exit.
Pardon me?
Building an exit off-ramp.
Yeah.
Yes, but trying to do so with very little public awareness of that because of the fear of blowback from the grassroots of the Republican Party.
Major, I'm going to bring in Jamie Yuccas in just a second. She is in Arizona, so I want to just have you pull up Arizona because we're going to talk about that. And Jamie, explain to us where you are and what you're seeing behind you.
Well, I'm at the Maricopa County Elections Department, and what you can see behind me is what Major is talking about. There are hundreds of pro-President Trump supporters. As I just started talking live, some of them have started yelling at me. You can hear them yelling, "Count the vote." You see plenty of American flags and President Trump 2020 flags. You also see a number of flags that say, "Take them away," with AR-15s on them. There are a number of people who are armed in this crowd. They say it's to defend the Second Amendment. What happened inside that building right now, and is currently happening, is that ballots are still being counted. So we had about 61,000 ballots reported this morning from this elections office. That put us at a threshold of about 51% for President Trump, which is well below the threshold of what he needs, of 55.6%, if I'm doing my math right, of what's left. Now, we do still have about 200,000 ballots that need to be counted at this point right now. We've seen a number of sheriff's deputies coming in and out of both the elections office here in the parking lot and on the other side of this fence to make sure that the crowd doesn't get too rowdy here. They've been mostly peaceful, just chanting and talking amongst themselves, waving flags and things like that. We've had a number of speakers come up to talk and number of signs and things like that. Every time the media is around them, they keep telling us that they want transparency. They want the votes counted here. They want to actually be able to go in and see what's happening. We remind them they can do that. There are 24/7 web cameras available in every single Arizona elections office. They just have to go to the county's website to do that. They claim it's not good enough, so they plan to remain here. This rally started just about 20 minutes ago and is expected to go for quite some time today. So we'll remain on scene. and see if anything changes. As I said, this has been mostly peaceful so far, but I can tell you that every time President Trump talks about those illegal votes, that is another chant that happens here. It seems to embolden this crowd, and the feedback that we get is that they want to make sure that every vote here is counted. Nora?
Jamie, it's hard to tell looking at that picture, but how large is the crowd and what exactly are they saying? I can't understand.
It is hard to tell how large this crowd is, Gail. I can tell you because it actually wraps around different points. And what the elections office did is put up fencing to make sure that the workers inside can do their job while these demonstrators are out here. And the crowd itself right now, I would say there's a few hundred people. This is the largest crowd that we have seen out here so far. So you may remember the other night when things did get a little out of hand where police in riot gear had to move them back from the door. There was probably only about 150 to 200 people at that time. I would say that this crowd is nearing close to double that point right now. But what they are yelling is count the vote, not stop the vote. We've heard stop the vote in other cities. Here, they want the vote counted, so they'll chant count the vote at this point. And they want to make sure that legal votes are counted. We keep hearing that a lot chanted as well.
Jamie Yucca is there in Maricopa County. We should also note for everyone that 93% of the vote is in there. Also at CBS News, we have just within the last hour or so projected that Senate race there in Arizona for Mark Kelly, the former astronaut. That is a Democratic pickup in the state of Arizona. And it just might be that Joe Biden is actually riding Mark Kelly's coattails in the state of Arizona because he has a much larger lead there. I wonder if we can just quickly go to the wall in Arizona, because according to my math, it's about 43,700 lead for Biden.
Right there.
And I understand that there's still some votes to come in from Pima County, which is Tucson.
Which is right down here. But what I want to show you, everyone, real quickly, is what things stand now and what they were in 2016. So watch carefully and keep your eye right here. This is Maricopa County. Keep your eye right here. Boom.
Wow.
Light red, light blue. That's the whole tail of the tape in Arizona. The suburbs around Phoenix in 2016 were for Donald Trump, nominally. Where are they now? Nominally and pivotally, they are for former Vice President Joe Biden.
That's a good illustration. You were there. You did that piece for 60 Minutes. What's changed?
Two things have changed. A lot of people coming in from California, 300 people a day move into that county right there. And the other thing, of course, is the rising Latino vote in Maricopa County in Arizona, but in Maricopa County in particular. If Joe Biden wins Maricopa County, it'll be the first time a Democrat has won it since 1948. So, and the reason this is important is not just because he gets the electoral votes, but because Democrats believe that Phoenix is like Denver, a city that went blue and a state that went blue and is now locked in, that basically it is following a trajectory that Virginia followed and that they hope North Carolina will follow. They think Georgia's following, which is as the state gets changes, that it becomes a more democratic state.
And then what, more younger and more diverse?
Younger, more diverse, and well, basically that, yes, and that and that there are more states trending in that direction than there are old line states.
The other difference is that Arizona's a red state, but it's a John McCain red. It's not necessarily overwhelmingly a Donald Trump red. And in Arizona, you know, they really revere John McCain and his legacy and his kind of politics. Fair enough.
But this is one of the great questions, because there's a whole bunch of Republicans in Arizona who say, no, we don't like John McCain. He was a rhino. So there was this clash about the future of the party. And if Arizona turns blue, then a real verdict will have come in about the future of the Republican Party.
But I think there are enough Republicans there in the middle who know that John McCain and President Trump famously clashed. They know what President Trump said about John McCain not being a hero, and they know that John McCain and Joe Biden were great friends for decades.
And let's not forget about the endorsement for Cindy McCain for Joe Biden.
It's interesting because one of the signals from this election, and you're going to be covering it in Georgia, as those politicians take what's the weather of the politics right now to try to get elected or reelected in the Senate. But in Arizona, you've got to read the weather as it's getting bluer. There are now two Democratic senators for the first time in 70 years. Maricopa County went to a Democrat for the first time since 1948. The state is changing, and that the weather weather, at least in Arizona, is looking bluer.
We have promised from day one to be completely transparent with our viewers, as we've urged patience. And so as we look at Arizona and we label it likely Biden, we see that change that Major just pointed out in Maricopa County. The reason that CBS News has not projected that race for either candidate is because there are about 140,000 more early ballots to process there. That's why we list that state as only 93% in. And so while there's some modeling that the very smart statisticians and folks here at CBS News and other networks can do at this point, out of abundance of caution, we are just calling it likely Biden. Right, Major?
And if I could for just a moment, there's been a conversation about tension in the air. I just want to talk about two bits of intellectual tension within the Trump world. One, Arizona, keep counting the votes. Pennsylvania, stop counting the votes. I would describe that as intellectual tension. Second point, Doug Ducey is the governor of Arizona. He is a Republican. He is presiding over the legal counting of legal votes in Arizona. And a large crowd that is carrying weapons legally there is yelling and intimidating, so much so they had to apply security protection for the people of Arizona legally counting these ballots. There was a long-running conversation during this campaign year about mob rule and unruly mobs creating an atmosphere of discord or unsettledness in America. I'm not describing it that way, but you have to ask yourself, what are they yelling for? How are they yelling? And is that a mob that's trying to interfere with a legal process that is being overseen by a Republican governor in the state of Arizona?
Got it. But Major, it has to be disconcerting when you think about these poll workers. They are, number one, they're volunteers. They are just regular, normal, everyday people who just want to do their civic duty. They're your aunts, your cousins, your brothers, your sisters. The fact that they are putting themselves in jeopardy, I think that they are really another form of frontline workers.
Yeah,
By the way,
the fact
this
that they
is
have
them live,
to,
yeah.
this
completely
is them.
transparent.
Transparent.
It's live.
There are
So anybody
cameras.
says
You're
that
right,
there's
Nora.
something going on nefarious.
You can look at it.
doors.
You can look at it. It's all right there in the open. The fact that these people have to be escorted to their cars because they are doing their civic duty just makes no sense to me.
In the makes no sense category, the protesters are also chanting for what is actually happening.
Yeah.
Votes
Right.
are getting counted, and it's so transparent. We were just watching
Exactly,
it on TV.
John.
I mean,
Such a good point. And also the point that the president keeps saying, legal versus illegal. Would you please explain to people and to me, what is an illegal ballot?
Well,
what is that?
what we know an illegal ballot is not. You cannot define the votes that go to your opponent as illegal. This is essentially what the president is trying to do.
Yes.
It's much the same way he tried to define news he didn't like as fake news.
Yes.
The problem for him in this instance is where he can spin the news environment. He can't spin those good people doing the basic counting hour by hour. And he hopes very much that those good people doing that methodical counting will bring him a result in Arizona that will help him.
Yeah.
It's not happening that way yet, but he needs that integrity of the count that's going on in Arizona to work for him. So that's another way that there is tension.
One more thing that I just wanted to button up, which is that the numbers that we got in from Maricopa this morning, that changed a little bit of the margin, but not much.
Not much.
They broke 51% for Donald Trump. And I'm reading that everybody in Phoenix and in Arizona, the experts are saying that Trump would need almost 60% margin in order to take back that lead in Arizona. Is that correct? And so that's some prognosticating that's going on right now.
Right. That's the immutable truth of mathematics. And to John's point, you can't argue your way past that. You can't tweet your way past it. You can't bully your way past it. The math is the math. It's being added in fully transparent ways in Arizona and every other toss-up state. We haven't projected this. We're just showing you the math.
All right, Ed O'Keefe.
Well, this was what the Biden campaign was warning supporters about yesterday. But there was a chance he would hit the 61% threshold, which he did not. But they said, stay patient, stay calm. That's what they were channeling, is that could potentially happen. Can I button up one other thing?
Yes, please.
If we weren't clear about this earlier.
We're in the buttoning up category.
Yes, we are. They are making plans. If things get called for the former vice president this afternoon, they are making plans for him to speak tonight. And it would be tonight if it happens this afternoon. If it happens later, probably gets pushed into Saturday. There are questions about this. We've confirmed it. Other places reporting it as well. But there would be remarks from him tonight declaring himself the winner should it get called this afternoon. We don't know when or if that will happen. It depends on the vote count in several places. But those plans are being made in Delaware.
All right. Well, I wonder if we can get an update then from our elections director just about where we stand in a number of these states in terms of getting closer to the ability to call them, or how much time we may need in order to do that. Anthony, we have a quick question for you.
Sure.
If you want to join Major over there.
Yeah.
There's a question about.
Look, this is live. This is live.
Timing.
We're watching
There's a
ballots
question about
coming
timing.
in. We've got people on the
Why don't we go
ground.
back to Pennsylvania then, just to show, because are you getting any closer to feeling like you could call that state?
No, not at this moment. And what happens is this can change moment to moment, but as counties report what they've counted and what's outstanding, we get a better picture of the way things are trending, right? So what you see right now is we still are waiting for more count out of Philadelphia, but it may be out of Pittsburgh, out of Allegheny County, that we need to wait to see how much they have and how the candidates do there as well in order to put together a composite, a statewide measure of how each of them are really doing and what's left.
What button?
Hit the check mark.
There we go. That I can
Okay.
do.
So you've still got a large pile of ballots out there. And in some sense, you see right now, if you hit the back button, okay, you still see this margin here for Joe Biden. Yes, he is in the lead. And yes, the areas that are still left to report are on balance Democratic. So that we transparently say is a trend line that is going his way. However, when you get down to it, it's only about 8,000 or 9,000 votes, and it's really not that hard to shift that. Once you get into tens of thousands of votes, perhaps, then you can start to say, well, that's a trend line that wouldn't reverse.
So, Anthony, when you get new votes, you're not only learning about the number, but you're also learning a little bit more about voter behavior, which tells you maybe something about the votes that are yet to come. Is that right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And to a certain extent, then the pie, if you think of it, think of the pile of votes like a pie and they're dividing it up, right? What remains gets smaller and smaller. And so the trailing candidate has to get a bigger and bigger slice of a smaller and smaller pie. Okay?
Well,
And
Anthony, looking at that pie, do you see any scenario that pie would go in Trump's favor?
Well, what you really need to know, actually, hit the check mark, okay? Hit the trailing, okay? This is that pie, okay? So the pie at 54% is not an unreasonable number. This is what Donald Trump would need to catch up to Joe Biden, okay? Now, you figure right now Donald Trump is getting beneath that number statewide. So you've got the start of a pattern. But is it unreasonable that number might make it to 54% in tight races? It could.
But doesn't the fact that where the outstanding votes are coming from, doesn't that lead you to believe that it's highly unlikely? I know in the world anything is possible, but looking at the outstanding votes, doesn't that lead you to believe that it's highly unlikely that those votes will go in Donald Trump's favor?
Well, that's why we describe the state of the race as trending toward Joe Biden based on what we've seen. But
We have characterized that?
it's that likeliness, it's that likelihood that we want to be really clear about. It's not about, well, maybe, or well, it could, but we want to be really, really, really confident about the way that it's going.
And Anthony, are you looking for the spread between these two candidates to get outside of recount range? Is that something that's important to you before making a call?
Well, that would be ideal, but at the same time, that may be harder to precisely measure because you need to know then what the total vote is going to be in order to figure out what the recount margin is going to be. So it could be a little uncertain there.
And let's just pause there because it's worth emphasizing this point in Pennsylvania. The total vote, there is a percentage of the vote that is not being counted because it arrived with a valid postmark on Election Day after. There's a 3-day period under Pennsylvania rules where those are accepted. They haven't been counted yet. So getting to that idea of what's the total vote count, hard to know because they are being set aside, and this vote total, as it accumulates, represents votes cast early, mailed, and arrived on Election Day. Not a single ballot after Election Day, even though it will be legally counted, has been added to these vote totals.
Right. If the pie gets bigger, then you don't need as much of it to catch up.
Okay, I'm following the pie analogy, but you've labeled
Making me
Nevada, you've labeled Arkansas, Arizona.
Yeah.
Nevada and Arizona as likely Biden. I don't understand why you're not labeling Pennsylvania as likely Biden. That's what I'm confused.
Well, for one thing, the trend line and the size of the lead with just a few thousand votes there. But Major, if you could go to the back up arrow. There you go. Okay. Here's the thing about Arizona. One is that the model estimate has had this pointing toward Joe Biden for a while, and that's what happens in typical elections versus what you're already seeing. It's that voter behavior trend that John mentioned. But the other thing here is, and this is the tricky part about Arizona, is that you get Maricopa County, which, as we mentioned, John knows so well. But when we get ballot results from Maricopa County, we don't necessarily know which portion of it they're from. And it's so large and it's so diverse that makes it a little bit harder to try to figure out what that trend within the county would
Meaning
be.
some areas are concentrated Trump areas within Maricopa County.
There's no question about
Absolutely.
it. It could be from a place that's very Republican. It could be from a portion of it that's very Democratic. What I can tell you, and this goes back to something you said earlier, here, let me turn on the pencil for a second, is that as we've seen ballot reports out of there, Joe Biden has been fairly stable in some of those now at about 51%. There was a point earlier yesterday when his numbers were going, say, 53% to 52%, and now the last one sort of plateaued off at 51%. So that's how Joe Biden basically maintains his lead while that pie shrinks. It's a little bit like trying to run out the clock in a baseball game, but
There is no clock in a baseball game. Come on, come on.
That's my point.
Come on, I know that.
This is so incredibly helpful in terms of
Yes.
sharing with everyone
Yes.
just how complex
Agreed.
this system is,
Right.
and what we're doing here at CBS News and our counterparts as well in terms of this. Thank you so much. I want to bring in our CBS News political analyst and former White House Chief of Staff for President Trump, Reince Priebus. Reince, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. So, have you spoken with President Trump?
I recently spoke to him, and he wants to do, I think, what you're all hearing. He wants to make sure all the ballots are counted. I think he wants to make sure that it's fair and it was clean, and he's got people around the country checking in of all that. So I think that's the process, and I think that's what the campaign's going to follow.
How would you describe the mood within the White House?
Well, I think, I heard you talking about Arizona. I think that there is a real feeling, and I understand what you said about the last batch. I thought that some of that last batch in Arizona came from Pima County. I could be mistaken, but knowing what's out there, I think there's some confidence on the campaign side that this election in Arizona is going to swing 1,000 or 2,000 votes either way.
But he's
And
losing
getting
Pima.
Arizona back in.
He's losing Pima 59-39, the president is. So
True.
you wouldn't want, that's not a good county for him.
No, I understand it. That's why what I said was the reason that last batch may have not been as good as the other batches was that a lot of it was from Pima County. So we're agreeing with each other. But I think getting Arizona back on the map, obviously, psychologically, is going to be very important for the campaign. And if Arizona doesn't come back into play, then you're into canvassing and looking for clerical errors and things like that. And those things can happen. But, it has to be extremely close for, like I'm in the state of Wisconsin, for a machine count re-election, you have to have serious, like mechanical canvassing type transcription errors that you can find during the canvass. And then the canvass gives you the time to put your affidavits together for the recount. So
And let me ask you about that, Ryan. Yeah, I noticed you used the phrase clerical errors. Your successor as now chairwoman at the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel, said, "We are not seeing any evidence of widespread fraud." Would you agree with that?
Well, I'm not in the weeds with it, so I'm not a good person to ask. But what I can tell you is there are things like this. For example, I know that in Michigan, I'm not in Michigan right now, but in Michigan, there was things like in Huron County, which, by the way, is like the thumb part of the mitt. They sent in a amount of votes for 45 votes for President Trump. Turns out it was 450. In another neighboring county, they reversed the Trump-Biden number, and it ended up netting Trump 6,000 votes. I mean, that stuff happens in canvassing. But I've led recounts in the state of Wisconsin and around the country. I can tell you that the time for fraud and affidavit, and that is during the recount, when you petition the court and you start pulling ballots out of the boxes.
But Ryan, could we go back to Arizona for a second? You said something would be psychologically helpful to the campaign, but what difference would it make? Because let's say Donald Trump gets Arizona, he still doesn't have enough if Joe Biden, as the way it's looking, gets Pennsylvania and Georgia. That puts him well over the 270 mark. So what difference would it make?
Well, I mean, it makes a difference in that, number one, winning a recount and court cases in 3 states is obviously harder than in 2. Secondly, I think if you put Arizona back on the map, then you need to make sure that the closer races, at least as we sit here now, I don't know how it's going to look in 12 hours, but the closer races in Georgia and Pennsylvania, still counting ballots, still proceeding, I think are opportunities for the campaign. And so that's the whole point. I think getting some sort of ray of sunshine here by reversing Arizona, I think, would be a psychological lift.
Okay, I see.
And that's an interesting point, and that perspective is reflecting what the White House is saying. If it's that narrow of a margin in Arizona, if it's still a narrow margin in Pennsylvania, and certainly is in Georgia because it's within recount range in Georgia at this hour. You know, the president said something really interesting on the day of the election when he addressed his campaign team. He said, losing is hard for him. Do you think anyone has spoken with the president about, or had a conversation with the president about what happens if he loses?
I don't know about that. I think the mindset now is to keep thinking about winning until the time comes that, it isn't. But I think their view is, and the campaign's view is that they're going to get Arizona back on track, and then they're going to fight it out in Georgia and Pennsylvania. And let me remind you, I know you know this, and it's that in 2016, when I was heading up the RNC, we were conducting and paying for recounts in 4 states across the country in November and December that Hillary Clinton's campaign launched. So this isn't like sour grapes or some kind of untoward activity. This is what campaigns do when you have really, really close races. They go to canvass, they recount, and the process plays out. I mean, that's what campaigns do, especially in now, 2020 and where we are today.
Hey, Ryan, it's Nancy Cordes. I hear what you're saying, that campaigns ask for recounts all the time. But what they don't do is they don't say that the voting is illegitimate. They don't say that the votes that aren't for them or the votes that came in late are somehow illegal. You would agree, right?
Well, I've said things like that many times. So I think that I have experienced cases of illegal voting, certainly not hundreds of thousands, but you go back in Milwaukee where I'm at, it's a unique place because in 2004, the Milwaukee Police Department put together a 70-page report of voting irregularities and problems in Milwaukee. It wasn't the party, it was the Milwaukee Police Department. I remember a police officer in my law firm where I work handed me a copy of their report. And what they found was it wasn't just illegal activity, it was more of good people trying to do a good job, being overrun with thousands of ballots, signatures all over the place, identification problems, registration problems, vacant lots.
But why would that be more likely to benefit? Sorry to jump in, but why would that be more likely to benefit Joe Biden versus Donald Trump if there are clerical errors here and there?
Well, I mean, it depends where they're at and it depends on the motivations. Look, I'm not the one gathering up the affidavits. I mean, my advice to the campaign would be that for anyone that says that there's fraudulent activity going on in my community and I saw it, I'd say, fine. Here's an affidavit, swear under oath and penalty and perjury that this happened, give it back to me, and I'll put it together as part of my petition to the court when the recount starts. When I was a lawyer many, many years ago, and we represented Bush in the recount in 2000, you might remember there was a lot of states recounting. It wasn't just Florida. I was the young lawyer that was driving around Wisconsin, gathering up affidavits. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. I mean, it's where you separate the accusation from the reality.
And just, Reince, just on that.
That reality doesn't come in the process until after the canvass.
Okay.
And we should revisit just quickly on that Milwaukee police report. They found very little fraud, and they found it didn't sway anything. So it actually was a very thorough investigation that didn't find much there.
Well, it's not. I don't know about that, John. I mean, it was a result of some of the requirements from the Help America Vote Act, which ended up blowing up in the Supreme Court. But it certainly established problems with signatures, voter rolls, registrations. I don't remember every detail of it, John, but I do think it was a landmark report that certainly showed a lot of problems in our elections. I'm not suggesting.
Right. So you got to be careful if you don't remember every detail of the report with old John Dickerson.
Well, I don't remember
this guy's just,
who
fact
does
checked.
remember every detail?
Who just fact checked a whole book on presidential history. But anyway, no. But look, this is we appreciate your perspective, Reince. Yeah, I appreciate, and Reince, thank you, because in just laying out the map, you really have reflected, I think, what the view is inside the White House, that they believe they could turn Arizona around and maybe either litigate or try and win a number of votes in Georgia and Pennsylvania. And that certainly is the belief of Republicans, and you have reflected that. And so thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. We also want to bring in Democratic Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, who joins us now. Senator, good to see you. You just heard what President Trump's former chief of staff said about Pennsylvania. What are you hearing?
Well, first of all, Nora, Joe Biden's going to carry Pennsylvania. He's ahead now, but he's going to carry it. And when the official vote is done, he'll win Pennsylvania by somewhere north of or south of 100,000 votes. He's going to win Pennsylvania, get the 20 electoral votes. I think that's the reality. I realize there might be litigation, but that's where it's going to end up.
Where do you see that vote margin coming from? Major Garrett's going to pull it up on the map while I ask you this, but we don't have more than just a couple 100,000 votes outstanding. How is Joe Biden going to win by such a large margin?
Well, Nora, in every election we've ever had, there's a certification process. So more votes come in over the course of the counting that continues until it is certified and there's official count. One number that's not reflected is the provisional ballots. We're told that's about 100,000 in addition to the ballots that are being counted now. So even if over the next 24, 48 hours or so, he's ahead by some other number, 40,000, whatever it turns out to be, we think it'll go higher when the official vote is completed. And by the way, President Trump's official margin in Pennsylvania was 44,292. So this would be obviously in the end a wider margin.
So this was my point, Senator Casey. This is our vote tally here because we show that there are only 133,000 outstanding votes there. So that would mean that he would have to win 90% of the outstanding vote in order to win by 100,000 votes. How is that possible?
Well, in the official count, Nora, that's not the numbers you're looking at don't include provisional ballots. They'll be part of this count in the end. The official vote, the official certification will happen probably 2 weeks from now. So the numbers that you'll see on the screen for the next couple of days won't reflect that. So the number will grow. That's the best estimate that we have, and that's based upon the data from the Voter Project, folks that have been looking at these numbers and making that assessment.
Senator Casey, it's Ed O'Keefe of, this is CBS. Good to have you with us. I know you're
ID in there, Ed.
I know you're also a native of Scranton, and you also subscribe to the former vice president's theory on how Democrats should try to win elections by being sort of middle of the road. Try to be as mainstream and welcoming of everyone as possible. Did he accomplish that goal, given how close the margins are in your state? And how difficult, give us an early sense, do you think it's going to be if the Senate remains in Republican control, maybe by just 2 or 3 votes, to get the Biden agenda enacted, should he become president?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of things right now. I do think that if Joe Biden's the president, I believe he will be based upon the data, but and the Senate remains Republican, we don't know that yet. That'll be a challenge at a time of real crisis. I can't think of anyone better prepared to meet the moment, to meet that challenge, than Joe Biden. But if you look, the map behind me tells a story that both parties should pay close attention to, at least with regard to how to win Pennsylvania. Joe Biden ran a campaign that allowed him to do substantially better than 2016 in the 4 suburban counties around Philadelphia, and also to get a better number in Allegheny County, where Pittsburgh is, right over that shoulder, and obviously to do well in Philadelphia. But he cut into margins in northeastern Pennsylvania and to a certain extent in central Pennsylvania. So he ran a strong campaign, and that's why he's the winner.
And can I ask you about that, Senator Casey, because I just pulled up on our map here, too. I mean, Erie, Pennsylvania, a state which we show the former vice president leading President Trump in Erie. I mean, that was, explain for people who don't know Erie, what's so significant about this county.
Well, Erie went from, it's written up there, but I think I'm remembering this right, plus 16 for President Obama, minus 2 for Secretary Clinton. I did very well in the 18 election. We was able to flip it back by 18. But just winning Erie by several percentage points is a big pickup. So in the counties where he had to reverse things, he was able to do that to a large extent, or at least to keep the margins down in a lot of counties.
Yeah. And Senator, what is your sense about when we will get the next tranche of votes from the Secretary of State?
Nora, I don't know. That's the short answer.
Senator Casey, this is Major Garrett. Because you mentioned it, for the benefit of the audience, in Pennsylvania, what is a provisional ballot? How is it put together? And under what conditions is a provisional ballot accepted? Because you mentioned it, that's an important part of the process there. Please walk us through it.
To the extent you can.
Uh-oh.
Oh.
What a setup, too. That was a really important answer I was waiting for.
Lost you, Senator.
Tell him to hit the mute button, Major. Tell him to hit the mute button.
Tap your ear.
It's like he's on mute.
Yeah, go ahead. John Dickerson has a question, too, for you, Senator. Thank you so much. We appreciate you answering all our questions.
Thank you very much.
Well, this is...
There he is.
Oh, wait, don't go anywhere, Senator.
Senator?
Yes.
Are you still with us?
All right. Can you give us the provisional ballot answer? We somehow... A gremlin got in there and gobbled it up. So please, with our indulgence, give us that answer one more time, please.
Yeah, Major, I won't be able to give you an exegesis on provisional ballots.
No. Big picture.
But here's what it is. Big picture. Here's what it is. They are ballots that have they have a challenge attached to them, meaning that there's a question about whether the voter is eligible. There are lots of them every year. I'm told it's about 100,000. Those will be worked through. My experience I've been in 6 statewide general elections. My experience is when the provisional ballots have been counted, I got a bigger margin. So if that prevails, that's obviously going to be significant for Joe Biden. But I can't predict how many of those he'll get.
All right. Senator Bob Casey, thank you for walking us through what provisional ballots are, as well as your understanding of all of the counties in the great state of Pennsylvania. Thank you so much. John Dickerson.
Thanks very much.
I just wanted to read a comment here by Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska, who says voter fraud is poison to self-government. So these are major allegations. He's talking about the president's allegations. Continuing from Senator Sasse here, if the president's legal team has real evidence, they need to present it immediately to both the public and the courts. In the meantime, all legal votes need to be counted according to relevant state laws. This is our American system, and it works. That's from Senator Ben Sasse, Republican of Nebraska.
And
Boy, Nancy, Senator Ben Sasse is really becoming very outspoken.
Right. It's always easier to be critical of the president, the leader of your party, once you know that you're going to win re-election or that you have. That does tend to embolden.
One of the things we're taking here, though, is what do Republicans see the political weather as? Right. And where is the president of their party? And do they need, either in the moment or for their political future, to look like they are rushing to his aid? Or do they find themselves extremely busy with other things and they can't comment right now?
Yeah.
Or do they take the route that Senator Sasse took, which is to position himself in mild opposition to the president.
And
I'm
actually,
curious to see-
they've gotten pretty used to this dance over 4 years,
true.
frankly,
Yes.
on a number of issues that they sort of start to one by one send this signal to the president when they feel that he has really gone seriously astray. And then if he doesn't get the message, the calls get louder and more numerous. And so this is kind of the same pattern that we're seeing here, where you've got Sass coming out after Pat Toomey, after Roy Blunt, and a number of others. And I suspect that if at some point today the race is called for Vice President Biden and the president still refuses to concede, those calls will get dramatically louder and you'll be hearing from a lot more.
But it seemed
remember-
many times, though, guys, it was like they all needed pedicures in Peru. Nobody wanted to speak out against the president, even when they vehemently disagreed with what he was saying or doing or tweeting.
Because they know that in many cases he is more popular with conservatives in their state
they are.
than they are.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how frustrating it is time and time again to ask them in the halls of Congress about statements that they know are untrue, and they will tell you
And they
no,
would
up
walk
is
on
down,
by.
Remember, though,
black
I
is
also
white,
think
and they won't.
part of Nebraska went for Joe Biden. The one congressional district did vote for Biden, so he is reading this politics of his state to some extent.
Well, I also think we should go back to the big map right now, because while this is an electoral college victory that either side needs to win, in the popular vote, you can see here that Joe Biden has won almost 74 million votes, and Donald Trump has won almost 70 million votes. And so that's in part why Republicans are reluctant to criticize this president, because there is an enormous amount of people that came out and voted for him, wanted him to continue 4 more years in the White House.
And to John's point about the future, there are just 1,460 days until Election Day 2024, in which Ben Sass might potentially be a factor. So
And
you're
frankly,
thinking
the
ahead.
president was very helpful to Republicans down ballot. The fact that he was back on the ballot this year as opposed to 2 years ago meant that they were able to pick up about a half a dozen House seats that they didn't think that they could win, because when he's on the ballot, it brings out conservative voters.
It's worth reminding that so the conversation we've just had here feels pre-election in the sense that it's all about positioning and supposition and punditry. There is anti-punditry going on, which is to say the process of counting votes, which is the real measurement of the people's choices, and then the courts are deciding too. And that's one way in which this conversation, which might have a familiar feel, is being backstopped by something real and something that's giving us actual results and something that's long-standing. And that's why this is a very different political situation than the one the president normally finds himself in.
And the fact, too, I think, Nora, to your point, you can't underestimate his power, President Trump's power and his popularity. The fact that it was still this close in so many places means that there's a lot of work that now has to start on either side in terms of uniting this country. And that's what I'm worried about.
That's why the White House at this hour saying the president has no plans to concede. We'll show everyone the map again. There are 5 states that CBS News has yet to project. Those include Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. Overnight, former Vice President Joe Biden taking the lead in Georgia and Pennsylvania, which means he now holds a lead, albeit narrow one, in many of these states in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona. President Trump is leading in North Carolina at this hour, but there are still slim margins in many of those states with a number of outstanding ballots that are just coming in, and that is why CBS News at this hour has not projected those 5 states or projected a winner for the White House and the U.S. presidency. The votes do keep coming in today. We're updating them all throughout the day. We're updating all of you online and on CBSN and on this network as we get more and more information in. And I think we'll get updates throughout the day, too, also from the president's team about his plans and additional legal challenges if they see them, because part of this, in addition to a recount in a number of the states, may also end up in some court battles.
John, I'm curious, the history of a recount. How often does a recount actually change the results?
Well,
do you know?
I'm out of my depth there, Gail, except to say this. Often you have recounts and they'll find 100 votes, 200 votes, 300 votes, but it's small. I can't at present think of Now, there are lots of instances in which somebody is ahead at one point, and then when all the votes come in and are totally counted, and that they, and that happens actually in Arizona quite a lot, that it changes, that the final score is not the same as the scoreboard, to steal a metaphor from last night, but that's different. That's not a recount.
All right, just as we are about to finish up this hour, I want to have Major Garrett just quickly pull up the state of Pennsylvania, because there has been a change there in just the last minute with more reporting. We now have Joe Biden's lead has extended to 12,390, you see there. He took the lead in Pennsylvania earlier this morning, and now it is at 12,000. Thanks to everyone who's been part of this coverage, and our coverage will continue on our 24-hour streaming network, CBSN. There will be more on your local news on this CBS station. We're going to have a full wrap-up tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Norah O'Donnell at CBS News Election Headquarters in New York. Thanks to Gail, John, Nancy, Major, and Ed.